Hello and welcome to this video on the opening series Simplified Openings. In this video I will give you a line against the Alapin Sicilian. The Alapin Sicilian is a very popular choice against the Sicilian because it's a line that's immediately from move 2. It is white who directs the game in the direction he wants to go. So this is the main reason for its popularity, and it often doesn't give black the chance of an open fight that black usually wants to obtain when choosing the Sicilian defense. So in this video I would like to give you a line that is pretty forcing in nature and in fact manages to attack the Alapin Sicilian from the very start. So what is this line? So e4, c5, c3, the Alapin Sicilian. Now we go with d5. e5, queen d5. Apart from d5, knight f6 is the other main line, but d5 is the one we will be looking at it now. d4, white can start with knight f3, but after knight c6 we will have a transposition after d4, cd, cd, and e5 as we shall see. d4, cd. Now this is already the beginning of the line. Normally black goes knight c6 or knight f6 or e6 in this position, but starting from this moment we attack. So cd4, cd4, knight c6. The attack starts. First the pawn is attacked on d4. Knight f3, white defends the pawn. e5. This is the beginning of the attacking line. Black is very aggressive, attacking the pawn on d4. Now the good aspect when it comes from black's perspective in this line is that white has practically no choice if he is to play the most critical line. The alternatives that white has along the way are really very easily dealt with. So this is the first moment where white has some sort of a choice. The main move, and by far the best move, is the move knight c3 attacking the queen on d5. The alternatives are really very easy for blacks. For example, d takes e5 is a natural move to consider, but after queen d1, king d1, bishop g4, it's very obvious that black has easy play. The knight is pinned, the pawn on e5 can be taken, long castle can come, knight g7, knight g6, hitting that pawn on e5. It all comes in very smoothly for black. So this is the first moment when white's alternative is harmless. Knight c3 therefore, and now no going back. Bishop b4, developing with tempo, pinning the knight, thus securing that the queen stays on d5. Another position with a choice, the main move and the best move is bishop d2, breaking the pin. The alternatives again are very easily dismissed. D takes e5, queen takes d1 check, king takes d1, bishop g4. Very similar to what we saw just earlier. Long castle comes, oops, not that long. Long castle with a check, knight g7, knight g6 are the moves that black is playing in the several next steps. Yeah, so that's one line. The other one is bishop e2, sacrificing the pawn on d4 after e4, and now castling. So what white did is he gave up the pawn on d4 but managed to castle, and now there is an attack on the queen on d5, and dc3 is not possible because there is a pin on that pawn on d4. Now the simplest is to drop the queen back all the way to d8. Now the queen is protected, so the knight is hanging, and the pawn is protected too, so white cannot capture it immediately. White should play knight b5, attacking the pawn on d4, but now black just continues development with knight f6 and castling, and white regains the pawn, knight bd4, knight e4, but black castles next, and the position is equal. Let's say knight d4 short castle, or queen d4, knight d4 castle, with no problems whatsoever for black. This is another harmless line when it comes to white's choices. Therefore only move bishop d2. Now the queen is hanging, so black takes on c3. Again, no choice. White must take with the bishop. Taking with the pawn is bad, or at least inferior, because after e4, cd4, knight g7, black has really easy play against the IQP on d4. Short castle comes, maybe bishop g4, rook d8, and there is a lot of pressure on the, oops, no, too many clicks. Rook comes to d8, yeah, a lot of pressure on the d4 pawn. The queen cannot be easily ejected from d5, so this is inferior for white. So that's why bishop c3, and now e4, continuing the attack by hitting the knight on f3. Again, no choice. The knight must go to e5. Going to d2 is just too easy. Knight f6, bishop c4, queen g5. Very easy play. The pawn is attacked, short castle. If white castles, there is bishop h3. So black is doing great. Knight e5 is the only move. Knight takes e5, d takes e5, and knight e7. And we have reached the, you could say, starting position of the variation. Up to here, you saw that really white really has no real critical choices, alternatives to the moves we made. And I think psychologically it's a tricky line for white, because black is doing all these aggressive attacking moves from the beginning. And this is the starting position where white does have a choice, and a choice of sensible lines, and we will take a look at them. What you need to know from the start, from black's perspective, is that where the pieces should be developed. So black has two main setups. The first and the most desirable one is the bishop coming to c6, bishop d7, bishop c6, and the knight coming to d5. So that's one of the ideal setups for black, and the other one is the bishop coming to e6 and then knight coming to d5. But more likely is that the bishop will come to c6. Depending on what white does, there will be some adjustments, but this is the setup that you should keep in mind. So that's the first thing you need to remember. And the second thing is that you should know about black's dream scenario. Black's dream scenario in this line is to obtain a position where he has a good knight against a bad bishop on c3. So to give you an illustration of what this means, let's check one game between Judith Polgar and Vladimir Kramnik, where black actually obtained the ideal scenario. So Polgar played queen c2, short castle, rook d1, and now queen takes a2. This exchange of the central e4 pawn for the pawn on a2 can work in black's favor, as long term this gives black a queenside majority of 2 pawns against white's 1. So queen takes e4, bishop f5, developing with tempo, queen c4, bishop c4, and now the move bishop e6 immediately was possible. Kramnik first gained the tempo by rook ac8 attacking the bishop, bishop b3, and now bishop e6. Bishop takes e6, f takes e6, and you already can see the contours of the dream scenario. Good knight, bad bishop. That good knight coming to d5, and black already has a very big positional advantage. So here white already needs to think about equalizing and escaping with the draw. So one way to do that was by playing the move rook d7. Polgar played bishop b4, which was also possible but less precise. So it pins the knight. Kramnik went rook f8, and now somewhat inexplicably to me, Polgar just failed to take that potentially strong knight. White should have taken on e7, and after rook e7, black has some small advantage in the rook endgame, because rook c2 is coming and white's king is still stuck in the center, but objectively the rook endgame should be a draw. But the point is that after short castle knight d5, we have the dream scenario. Perfect knight, centralized untouchable knight, and a bad bishop limited by its own pawns. Bishop d6 looks nice on d6, but it's completely useless. Rook c2 attacking the pawn, b4, rook fc8, and rook ec8, sorry, and Kramnik went on to win in this game played in 1995 in Monaco. So this is what black wants. Good knight, bad bishop, and ideally with a queenside majority where black can advance and create a passed pawn. White can't do the same, because these 4 pawns on the king side can never really make a passed pawn, because there is black has a very strong control over the f5 square. So this is the dream scenario for black. Having established this, now let's check some of the theory here. Let's say bishop e2, short castle, and rook e8. Yeah? And now queen a4. This has been played by Sergei Tivyakov, one of the most important players for white in the Alapin Sicilian. So it's always worth noting how he treats certain lines in the Alapin to see what he thinks is the best choice for white. So this was played by him in a game from 2023, but it's not really a very, I would say, successful try. Queen a4, the idea is to free the d1 square for a rook, but bishop d7, this only helps black to establish the to develop the bishop. Queen a3, and now in a funny thing, maybe this was what Tiviakov was aiming for, because after bishop c6, which would be aiming for the ideal setup, rook a d1, curiously enough, a draw was agreed in the game Tiviakov-Reinderman, but in fact here white gets some pressure because queen e6, rook d6, queen a5 and f4 is a bit problematic for black. It's possible, but a bit problematic. Therefore, to avoid this, instead of bishop c6, queen c6 is better. And the queen very often gets away from d5 to liberate the d5 square for the knight. And now the knight is coming. Rook a d1, knight d5, there is no rook d6 anymore, and black has no problems. So the bishop alternatively can come to e6, yeah? So it's already good for black. So that's one line, bishop e2. Another line is rook queen e2, the idea being rook d1. So short castle, rook d1. And now black has a choice whether to take on a2 or to go queen c6. Both of them are possible, but this line does require a bit of precision because in both lines black needs to make some precise moves. So I will give you the, let's say I think a bit simpler line, which is queen c6. You can explore queen a2 on your own if you want. Again, looked at it and it's again equal for black, but it does require some precision on black's part. By queen c6, the threat is to go knight d5, to centralize the knight. Maybe bishop f5 to defend that pawn, or bishop e6 earlier. So now rook d6, attacking the queen. Yeah, queen a4, defending the pawn on e4 and attacking the pawn on a2. So b3, attacking the queen. Now queen a3. Threat is queen c1. So it's a very concrete line and not an easy one for white to play either, because you can't really play like this without any preparation. So the queen e4, queen c1 is bad. Queen b2, queen c5 is okay for black. Knight d5 can come, the bishop can be developed, it's already fine. So queen d2 and now queen c5. So after queen d2 there were threats like, let's say, bishop b4, but now queen c5 prevents bishop b4 because the pawn on e5 is hanging. So bishop c4, white develops, and bishop e6. This exchange of bishops in e6 is an important theme for black in these lines, because bishop f6, f takes e6, as we saw in the Polgar-Kramnik game, is a good transformation of the structure because it gives the d5 square for the knight. So bishop takes e6, f takes e6, and the tactical point is rook e6 is not really possible as knight d5. It attacks the bishop, and bishop d4, queen b5, the king stays in the center. This is already bad for white. Knight f4 attacks the rook, knight d3. It's already very bad for white. So white should castle, but now knight f5 gets rid of the rook. Yeah, and again, tricks, rook e6, e3 is strong. F e3, knight e3, there is a discovered check threatened. Rook b1 now should be played. Yeah, knight f5 check, preventing covers on the d4 square by controlling it. King h1, rook a d8, and there is a strong initiative here for black. The queen is attacked and the bishop is attacked, so the queen must stay close by. The rooks can penetrate and it's dangerous for white here. So after knight f5, bishop b4, and now queen b5, queen e5. Already it's a very good position for black. Okay, pawn up. Okay, it's a doubled pawn, but most importantly, black would like to somehow get this knight to d5 ideally. Yeah, but already no problems whatsoever for black. So that's one of the more concrete lines. Queen e2. It's worth noting that the exchange is just completely harmless. Knight takes d5, the knight already lands on d5. So bishop b5 check, bishop d7, and now again this is a knight dream scenario. Take on d7, king d7, and the king comes to e6. Untouchable knight. bad bishop, this would be ideal. So it's better for white not to do that. Long castle, take on b5, take on d5, and now bishop c4, bishop c6, whichever you want, it's just equal, no problems. And the last move to check, queen a4 check, bishop d7, and now the queen must move. If it goes to, now what black would like to do is to go queen e6 and knight d5. So if white prevents that by putting the queen on b4, so targeting the b7 pawn, so no queen e6 is possible because the queen is defending that pawn, simply a5, hit the queen and continue with the plan. Now if queen d6, simply bishop c6. Then the queen drops back, knight comes to d5, job done. Alternatively, queen a3, but now queen e6. The idea is bishop c6, knight d5, yeah? So queen b4 now. There is also possible, let's say rook d1, short castle, yeah, and let's say rook d6, rook d6, queen f5, bishop e2, bishop e6, and now knight d5. This is an alternative, the bishop coming to e6. Again, it's very few ideas that black needs to know to navigate these positions. Let's say after here, if bishop e2, bishop c6, you already know the drill. Queen d6, knight d5, and that's it. Take on e6, no problems. Dream scenario practically, yeah. No queenside majority, but eternal knight. So queen b4 now to attack the pawn, and now the simplest is just to follow the plan, bishop c6. Defend the pawn, wants to castle, knight d5. Yeah. There are alternatives. Knight d5 is possible to play sharper, to sacrifice on b7, knight d5, let's say, queen b7, bishop c6. Yeah, let's say queen b3, short castle with the compensation. Rook is coming to b8, attacking the queen. Maybe bishop b5, again, strong knight, bad bishop, with compensation for the pawn. So bishop c6. Worth noting is that castling is not the most precise, as bishop c4 is strong. And now knight d5, queen b7 is a bit tricky. Already no compensation because white is developed and can castle at any point, so this is suboptimal for black. But like I said, bishop c6 is simple. If bishop c4, knight d5 now. Now if queen c5, queen e7 followed by short castle, or if bishop d5, queen d5, it's already equal again, yeah? Rook d1, a5, attacking the queen with the idea of queen a3, queen c4, preventing castling, yeah? Neither king can castle, but objectively the position is quite equal. Maybe you manage queen, bishop b5 and queen e2 mate, yeah? That would be nice. So that's pretty much about it. A very straightforward line leading to this forcing to the position on move 11, where this is the position, I'll put it again, where black has a straightforward play with a couple of piece setups, yeah, bishop d7, bishop c6 and knight d5, or bishop e6, knight d5. The queen moves to allow for knight d5. The dream scenario, good knight, bad bishop, and yeah, probably a few moves to remember in the queen e2, rook d1 line, but generally a line that's really easy to play, and I think practical line, which also is not very popular and probably not that well known at lower levels. So I think it's a good practical solution to the Alapin, just in line with the philosophy of the simplified openings. So thanks for watching this video. I'll do my Nakamura stuff. Smash that subscribe button, and yeah, tell me what you think about this in the comments. Check out my Chessable courses, you can see them in the video description. Subscribe, comment, stay in touch, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers everybody.